Hello. Does this one work? Yes, okay. Well, I was born down the street here at St. Mary's Hospital. And the other thing is that my mother left school when she was 13, and her first job was ushering right here. That's kind of cool to come back full circle. And when she got promoted to doing the tickets, she said that they made their extra money by cheating all the sailors that couldn't speak English. Didn't know our money system. So I thought I'd read. I'm a writer, and I thought that I'd read from my latest novel, Deep River, and a little. Thank you. And this is the prologue to the second part of the book, between when the heroine leaves Finland and comes to America, and she comes to settle in this region. And I was born right here next to the river, and I think a whole lot of fishermen relate to the water that they fish on. And this is, I guess it's a bit of a hymn to the river that's right down the block from us here. The majestic westward flowing river went without a name for millions of years. But for nearly 4,000 years, she was called Wema, Big River, by the first immigrants to her shores. Since 113 years before Aino's arrival, she has been called the Columbia. She begins life in rills along the immense north-south crest of a complex chain of mountains, starting with the Selkirks in British Columbia, which merge into the Bitterroots of Idaho and Montana, and then turn into the Grand Tetons of Wyoming. The rills become rivulets that become creeks that push and flow through waterfalls and rapids, pulled on by inexorable gravity to form the Duncan, the Kootenay, the Pend Oreille, the Kettle, and the Spokane, all flowing to join her. From the eastern slopes of the Cascade Mountains that divide Oregon and Washington and merge into the Sierra Nevada of California, she is met by the Okanagan, the Wenatchee, and the Yakima. The immense Snake River, formed by the Boise, the Owyhee, the Malheur, the Salmon, the Grand Ronde, and the Clearwater, merge with her from the south. From the highlands of eastern Oregon, the Umatilla, the John Day, and the Deschutes add to her strength. She cuts through the scarplands of the great lava flood of millions of years ago, forming deep canyons, and passes the Sunrise Side of the great mountain called Klickitat by the Yakima Indians and Adams by American settlers. She alone of all rivers has the strength to force her way through the Cascade Mountains, themselves pushed ever skyward by the vast power of the Pacific and San Juan de Fuca plates diving beneath the North American continent, where former ocean floors are turned into hot liquid that makes the land groan and tremble with the strain, until the lava bursts forth, forming peak after snow-covered volcanic peak, from Mount Silverthrone by the Straits of Georgia in British Columbia to horizon-filling Tacoma of the Lachute Seed speakers that the English speakers called Mount Rainier, which broods, waiting until it can again pour lava into the Salish Sea, all the way to translucent Shasta and dark-skinned Lassen, volcanoes deep into California. The river, cutting faster than these mountains rise from the majestic Columbia River gorge that separates the perfectly proportioned maiden Louet and Klickitat's angry rival for her hand, fierce East, named by the British Navy Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. Now, with the force of all her tributaries, she emerges alone from the western end of the great gorge to meet the broad, north-flowing Willamette, giver of rich, black earth. Then through forests so thick the sun does not reach their floors, flowing a mile wide, flowing 2 miles wide, flowing west, adding the rain-swollen waters of the Lewis and the Cowlitz rivers. Now flowing 5 miles wide, she reaches her mother, the sea, bearing her salmon fry, depositing her silt and sand, the carved rock of her battles with the land, forming 20-mile-long beaches on both sides of the ship-killing bar where the great river meets the surging tide, throwing up 40-foot standing waves as she shudders and bludgeons her way back to her origins, the sea, fecund with latent heat, cold to the human touch, but the source of enormous energy, feeding and growing the vast ocean storms that move ever eastward until they collide with the mountains and transform them into the steady rain that nurses the rivulets, causing them to grow like sprawling children until they are born again in the great river that cycles. This next piece is from a nonfiction book I wrote called What It Is Like to Go to War. And I was a Marine in Vietnam. And it's from the beginning of the book, a chapter that I call the Temple of Mars. And there is a fishing bit in it. Warriors deal with death. They take life away from others, and this is normally the role of God. Asking young warriors to take on that role without adequate psychological and spiritual preparation can lead to damaging consequences. It can also lead to killing and the infliction of pain in excess of what is required to accomplish the mission. If warriors are returned home having had better psychological and spiritual preparation, they will integrate into civilian life faster, and they and their families will suffer less. But the more blurred the boundary is between the world where they are acting in the role of God and the world where they are acting in an ordinary societal role, the more problematical the reintegration becomes. The sun had struggled all day behind monsoon clouds before finally being extinguished by the turning earth and the dark, wet ridges of the Annamese Cordillera. It was February 1969 in Quang Tri Province, Vietnam. Zoomer lay above my hole in the monsoon night blackness on the slick clay of Mutter's Ridge, the dark jungle-covered ridge paralleling Vietnam's demilitarized zone, where the 3rd Marine Division and the North Vietnamese Army had struggled together for 2 years. A bullet had gone through Zoomer's chest, tearing a large hole out of his back. We kept him on his side, curled against the cold drizzle, so the one good lung wouldn't fill up with blood. We were surrounded. There was no hope of evacuation even in the daylight. The choppers couldn't find us in the fog-shrouded mountains. I heard Zoomer all night, panting, as if he were running the 400, one lung doing for 2 and a body in shock. In and out, in the fog, the sighing sound of monsoon wind through the jungle. Out, the hot, painful breath. Zoomer had to go all night. If he slept, he'd die. So no morphine. Pain was the key to life. To help him stay awake and to calm my own fear, I'd crawl over to him and whisper stories. I grew up in Oregon, where as a teenager I worked with my grandfather Axel on his fishing boat at the mouth of the Columbia River. One night in June 1959, a dull thunk startled us into alertness as a heavy body slammed into the 4 football fields long gill net. The body's weight made the cork line, which floated on the surface and from which the net hung like a curtain, sink beneath the cold salt water. We approached the large gap in the cork line quietly, me steering the 30-foot fishing boat in the dark, Grandpa Axel in the bow with the rifle, worried that it was a sea lion. A sea lion could destroy the net, which next to the boat itself was Grandpa's most valuable investment. My spine prickled when I saw the plated body of a 7-foot green sturgeon slowly undulating, eerie and ghost-like beneath the dark water. It took everything both of us had to haul that sturgeon into the boat, several hundred pounds at 9 cents a pound, and not much tearing of the net. Grandpa Axel was pleased. He and I heaved the sturgeon into the fish box that temporarily held the salmon until we could put back into Scandinavian Station. That was where we unloaded and weighed our catch, bobbing on the swell beneath the crane that hoisted the fish boxes up to the waiting ice. Grandpa impatient to get back fishing, me happy to be idle. That night, when we hauled in the sturgeon, we still had plenty of room in the fish box, so we continued fishing. The sturgeon lay there alive, its wet scales reflecting starlight. It seemed an ancient thing from before the dinosaurs, breathing there, too primitive and rugged to die quickly like the more complex and finely tuned salmon. I kept going over to watch it. In, spiritus. Out, sanctus. Those were the words that came to me as I watched its gills pumping the alien air. In comes the spirit, out goes something holy, life perhaps. But I realized then that the in and out are somehow the same thing, and everything is touched by the holy when in the presence of death. I watched Zoomer pumping air, hanging on to the life with the same primitive doggedness of that sturgeon for all that night and most of the next day, before the fog lifted enough to get in a medevac bird. Others died, like the salmon, but Zoomer kept pumping, enduring the shelling with the rest of us, waiting for the fog to clear, waiting for the helicopter that would take him home. It came. As the fog closed in again just minutes after the helicopter got Zoomer out, alive, I realized that the mystery of life and death had once again played out before me, and once again I was in sacred space. And other than in my role as a walking weapons guidance system for the United States of America, totally unprepared to be there. The Marine Corps taught me how to kill, but it didn't teach me how to deal with killing. Thank you.
And who do we have here?
My name is Liza McQuaid.
Janet Thomas.
And where are you both from?
Portland.
Okay. And I understand this is your first time to the Fisher Poets Gathering.
It is, and you know what? This has been on my bucket list forever, and I just thought this is so great and so interesting that this year we finally made it happen. So,
Well, what do you think?
well, so far so good. We just came into town, so we're just kind of getting our feet under us. But yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
I see you have, I think I might have got a picture of you looking through that, or anything that you've marked off.
All kinds of things look great. We're looking forward to the poetry reading. It starts at 5. So, yeah.
We're kind of in our go with the flow mode, so we're just kind of flowing around, seeing what's happening. We were advised to check out different venues and see what we think.
And menus.
And menus, yes.
So, do you secretly have a thing for fishermen?
Oh, probably.
I have brothers that are fishermen in Hawaii, so I texted them and said I was coming, and they said, "Oh, sounds like fun." So.
Well, great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking time. Have a good time. Bye.